welcome to this session. We're very, very pleased to see you all here. There was originally planning to be 4 of us here, myself, Dominic, and Simon from Tamar Valley Food Hubs and Bob from the Apricot Centre. Unfortunately, both Simon and Bob have come down with COVID, and we had brief chats with them earlier in the week. And we made a plan B for a slightly slimmed down, well, a significantly slimmed down panel. So it's just Dominic and myself today. But we have got some information from Bob and Simon that will be chipping in, and we will do our best to cover all your questions. So I'm Nick Weir from the Open Food Network. I'm here with my colleague Dominic Acland from Good Food Exeter and the Southwest Good Food Network. We would like to talk to you about the Southwest Good Food Network. I think one of the things Dominic is going to say is a new name. I think we're about to rename this enterprise, but I'll not steal the thunder on that. And I don't even know the new name yet, so I'll leave that for Dom. But the session will run from now till 3:30 UK time, and it will be very participative. There's a presentation at the beginning that Dom will lead, and if you've got questions during that, please do put the questions in the chat. At some stage I will do a brief presentation, but that will be fairly flexible. Mainly we want to hear from you about your interest in building food networks, and for you to glean as much as you can from our experience. What we do know is that local food systems are very, very customizable and customized, and that they adapt very much to the local environment. So whatever you decide to build in your area will be different than has been built in the Southwest, but we hope that we can offer you experience of what has worked and what's not worked, and hopefully you can learn from our mistakes as much as our successes. Usual stuff around Zoom, please keep yourself muted unless you're specifically invited to ask a question. Please put questions in the chat. We will try to monitor stuff in the chat, and if you feel that we've missed your question, then please do repost it or raise your hand. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll find an option for under reactions to raise your hand, and we will keep an eye on people who want to speak. Is there anything that I've forgotten, Alison, that I should do in the housekeeping? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Great. So I'm going to hand over to Dom and take it from there. Thank you, Dom.
Thanks a lot, Nick, for the intro. And hi, everyone. Good to be here. And yeah, I'm just going to share my screen a moment and give you a quick run through about what we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years. At last year's ORFC, 2 years ago, sorry, we presented on the early inception of this network. So this is a bit of an update on where we've got to, and hopefully share some learning. So without any further ado, I will share my screen, and hope you can see it, and I'll just start there.
Yeah, that's looking good.
Looking good? Yeah, great. So yeah, local food networks making them real. And this came about, yes, here's the new name. It was called the Southwest Good Food Network. It's now called Good Food Loop. And you'll see why that's an appropriate name shortly. Good Food Loop Southwest. And yeah, this is a concept that could be adapted and picked up elsewhere in the country. But as Nick said, everything needs to be particular to your circumstances. Every place is unique. So there's no real template, just some learning. So we started work on this back in 2018. And it was a pilot at that point, funded through an organization called Resonance, which had a health and well-being fund. And the aim was to improve the affordability and availability of local sustainably produced food within the Southwest region, especially for those excluded from the market. So that's people who can't afford it or find it very inconvenient to get hold of. So we were trying to improve those aspects of the system. And we were a group of different organizations, different food hubs, working across quite a scattered geography, and I'll show that to you in a minute. And the idea was to see how we could collaborate to improve supply chain and tackle seasonality issues and quality issues, etc. And right at the core of all of our work is paying producers a fair price, and the food hub system that we're working within really does try to iron out a lot of cost and be very efficient and cost effective so that producers can get a fair price. The project is now currently funded by the Esmond Fairbairn Foundation for the next 3 years. So this is development work that's still ongoing, and it's becoming more and more viable as we develop it. But it's needing some funding support to help it happen. So just to share where we are, we're in the southwest of England, and the cities of Exeter and Plymouth are the main conurbations in our area, as well as Tor Bay, when you'll see in the next slide how this all fits together. So these red hubs, these red buttons are the hubs. Tamar Grow Local to the north of Plymouth, the Apricot Centre to the west of Tor Bay and north of Totnes, Good Food Exeter right in the heart of Exeter, and in my backyard, which is operating quite a rural community in East Devon. And so these are 4 food hubs. Each of them have a network of customers and a network of suppliers. So we've got suppliers surrounding typically an area of maybe 50 kilometers from each of these hubs, with food being brought into them for redistribution from the hub to the customer base surrounding them. And these are all operating online. These are online marketplaces with either home delivery, or customers are collecting a box of goods that they've ordered from a location in their neighborhood that's a kind of drop-off point. So customers are typically ordering a basket of goods, and they've got quite a big range of goods that they can order, that they can select from, and on a weekly basis. And those products are being packed, are being transported into each hub, packed there, and then made available, either delivered to direct to customers or to these drop-off points. That's the basic model, and the platform that each of these hubs is using is different. 3 of them are using Open Food Network, which Nick is going to talk about in a minute, and the Apricot Centre is using a platform called Boxmaster, and that's a little issue that we'll want to explore. So each of these hubs previously were operating completely independently, and what we realised is that there were some great benefits to be had from collaboration. And particularly, the first initial thought came because in the Tamar Valley, it's kind of microclimate, and it's got a really good extended growing season. So produce is becoming available, fresh produce is being grown in the valley, in the area, earlier than it's available elsewhere. And so could we increase the market for some of these growers and producers by moving produce around? And another key interest was that some specialist producers, and I've shown 2 on this slide. One is Solar Discretion, which is selling fresh fish direct from the Plymouth fish market. And the other is Forest Fungi, which is growing specialist fungi on coffee grounds in this location just south of Exeter. Could we make these specialist products more available to a wider range of customers and therefore improve the range of products available in each of the hubs? And so what we started to set up was this distribution round. And the way it works is that on a Thursday, all the orders will be collated, and all our suppliers are informed about what products have been ordered through all of these hubs. And starting at Tamar Grow Local, the produce is delivered into Tamar Grow Local, packed on a van, and the van drives to Plymouth, picks up the Solar Discretion order, drives onto the Apricot Centre, picks up a load of produce there, onto Forest Fungi, another load, onto Good Food Exeter, drops off a load of goods here, and then returns to, and picks up goods here, and then returns back to Tamar with produce. So produce is kind of flowing through this cycle. In my backyard, do their own little journey backwards and forwards to drop off and pick up. And Exeter is the key location where the big exchange happens. And that's a 225-kilometre round trip for that Tamar van, and about a 40-kilometre round trip for the In My Backyard van. Now, I'll just show you another slide that maybe illustrates this a bit more clearly, if you just bear with me. So these are the 4 hubs, and the green ones, the green boxes, are suppliers feeding produce into their local hub. And that produce is then transported via the TGL van, picks up more at Apricot Centre. When it gets to Exeter, it drops off all of this produce, Exeter in the orange box. All that orange box is imported into Exeter. In My Backyard also has dropped off some stuff in Exeter, and then it picks up stuff to take back to Sidmouth, and that's got that orange box. And then there's a whole load of more produce being added here, and that's taken back to Plymouth, to Tamar, and they are importing all of this. Tamar Grow Local stands, TGL stands for Tamar Grow Local. Sorry if I haven't made that clear. So this is a fairly complex distribution logistics system, and we're managing it through a combination of the Open Food Network platform and a workaround that the Apricot Centre are using with their Boxmaster to kind of align their orders with what's coming up on OFN. And there's a completely separate project, which is another presentation on at the ORFC, about how we get OFN and other platforms talking to each other in the future. And I'm sure Nick will mention that in a minute. So yeah, that's the system. So key benefits. Growers in any of these are sort of our geography can access markets beyond their normal reach. So they're not just talking about what's within driving distance on the day from their location. They can access a much bigger market. If you've got gluts and shortages, this can be managed across the network according to seasonality. It means that specialist producers can reach a much larger market. And for customers, it's really transparent pricing. We charge a 10% of wholesale value fee for the goods distributed. So Tamar Grow Local's van is typically, is carrying a few hundred to a little bit less than that, maybe 1,000 and a bit more worth of produce. And that just about has been covering the costs of running that van and driver on the day. And it's efficient because it uses in-house vehicle and driver capacity that we've already got that is spare. And the system means that even with the 10% built in, your average return to our producers is about 70% of the retail spend. So 75 pence in the pound for sales. That's aligned with our targets, really. The kind of learning we've had from this is when the hubs need to have their order cycles and delivery days aligned, so that in fact we're not quite completely aligned, and it makes it slightly clumsy, but we just about make it work with a Friday delivery day. And so that's challenging, but it does make it work. Keeping it local, so working across this geography seems to work. We did have an earlier phase of the pilot where we were trying to reach up as far as Bristol, which is another 70 miles away. And that turned into a whole day's worth of intensive driving and distribution when we tested it, and that was really not sustainable, very stressful. So we've found that working across this geography is effective, but equally the whole idea is to access a slightly different geography in terms of seasonality or specialist producers. So yes, you need to also balance the scale with what you've got, what producers you want to access, and are they close enough to make it work. So that's all from me. I'm going to stop sharing, and back to you, Nick.
Thank you, Dom. That's fantastic. I'm just looking at the notes that we talked through with Simon. So for those of you who've just joined us, we were planning to have 4 of us on this panel. 2 of them have come down with COVID, but we have got some notes from that. One of the things that Simon mentioned, I think, to us, Dom, was that your point about the Bristol being too far away, that I think he said that your experience was that 45 minutes between nodes was about the maximum effective distance. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably between 45 minutes and an hour between Exeter and Plymouth. So, and by going the back road is a fair old way. But yeah, you wouldn't want to be island hopping 45-minute node to node to node all day long. I think it's like, what's the distance between your extremities? And that's got to be a manageable amount. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I wonder if, for those of you participating who don't know what we mean by a food hub, I wonder if it might be worth us talking a bit about that. So we're talking about nodes and hubs interchangeably here. The idea is that the 4 points that we saw on Dominic's map are all food hubs, and then nodes in this distribution web. Food hubs, in my experience, can be defined very broadly. So I'm here with 2 hats on. I'm part of Stroudco Food Hub in Gloucestershire, but I'm also part of the Open Food Network. And the Open Food Network is being used across the UK by private businesses, community groups, not-for-profit organisations, local community groups of all kinds to set up food hubs, and every single one of them in the UK that I've seen is different. Some of them are farmers markets with an online shop front as part of the farmers market. Some of them are food hubs like the one that I'm part of, which is a not-for-profit co-op of 85 different local food producers and about 300 shopper families, and we run our own little food hub in Stroud. It's not part of a network, and that's one of the things I'm really keen to explore, is how do we set up a network here in Gloucestershire. Some of the food hubs are retail premises on high streets that want to have an online shop front linked to their premises, and so they link with local producers to sell fresh local produce online, and then the produce is delivered to the shop, and then the shoppers come in and collect the pre-ordered produce, and at the same time buy things off the shelf in the shop. Some of the food hubs are food banks, giving away surplus food to people who can't afford to pay full price for food. Some are buying groups, buying in sacks of rice and pasta from wholesalers and then splitting it and selling it at lower cost to their members. And all of these food hubs are what I'm really excited about with these networks is that we can start to join together these food hubs and join together the different types of food hubs to serve not just a wider geographical area, but a wider product range in terms of the types of products that they're shifting through the hubs. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Dom, in terms of the four enterprises that make up your network at the moment?
No, I mean, some stuff might come out in the discussion, but I mean, I think, you know, that it's been fascinating to see how the soul of discretion, the fish supplier from Plymouth, has been able to work into the system, and that's a really good case study, I suppose, of how it would have not been. Well, we did try direct courier of fish up to Exeter for the market, and that was challenging because sometimes the product would arrive and the ice had melted, and so it had dropped below the temperature. And because the couriers like transporting all sorts of stuff, they don't really care. So I think one of the key aspects of this is that we are in control of the distribution vehicle and staffing, so we can really keep an eye on quality and make sure that things are happening in a timely fashion, stuff's being looked after properly on the way, and it's really accountable in terms of what turns up where. So yeah, that was an interesting bit of learning as well, that managing the logistics yourself using this spare capacity is a really cost-effective way to do things.
Yeah. There's lots of really good questions coming through, and I'm going to be very disorganized about this and just pick them in random order. But there's a question from Stephanie about who sets the price and how you deal with producers setting different selling prices, which I think is a really interesting question generally. And what I notice across the Open Food Network food hubs is that the producers are encouraged to set their selling price. The hubs that are selling their produce, some of those producers will be selling direct, in which case they're setting the buying and the selling price at the same time. But if they're selling through a hub, the hub will make a markup, and the hub will negotiate that markup with the producer. And in some cases, hubs will apply a flat percentage across all producers. In some cases, the hubs will vary the markup they make depending on how difficult that producer is to manage. If the producer is able to deliver to the hub, it will be a lower markup, whereas if the hub has to go and collect the produce from the farm, then they will charge a higher markup. But the final selling price to the shopper or the buyer is made up of that initial selling price from the producer, the markup by the hub, and possibly a distributor markup. And I wondered, Dom, if you could talk a bit more about the percentage of the product of the final selling price that ends up with each of the participants in the short food supply chain.
Yes, so I think the example we were looking at was if a grower sells a £1 lettuce to the hub, and the hub will put on, say, 18%, and would retail that under its own shop front at £1.18. So then the producer's getting the full pound, whatever percentage that works out at. If that lettuce is coming into the hub and then being put on the vehicle and taken to another one of the hubs, then there's a 10% additional charge added. So that lettuce would retail at £1.28. So it would be more expensive in the hub that was more distant from the grower. And that is an important aspect, because a customer then can decide, well, they might say, I really want that lettuce because it's extraordinary quality, or it's one I can't get locally because nobody's growing it locally. And I don't mind paying the extra 10p. But the grower is still receiving the £1 for the lettuce that they wanted. It's the customer who's paying that extra distribution cost. But it's transparent, they know why it's happening, and they choose to do so. And again, this ends up with more local produce being more cheap, which is what we don't want to be transporting produce needlessly across the county. We only want to transport it where there's a demand and where people are willing to try it. And
the other thing that Simon wanted us to talk about is price transparency. One of the things he thought was really important in all of the food hub world is to make pricing transparent. I'm just going to share my screen to show you how that works. So this is an Open Food Network shopfront. The shoppers can see the picture of the product. They can click and find out a bit more detail about the product itself. They can also find out exactly who produces that. So you can see, because the supply chain is short and the distribution is as brief as possible, it is possible for the shopper to see the name and the contact details and the social media links of the producer. And in terms of pricing, there's a little pie chart on every Open Food Network shopfront that gives a price breakdown. So you can see how much this loaf of bread is being, the baker is charging £2.90, and the hub is making a markup which looks like 25%. My math isn't very good, but yes, that is the markup that the hub is making on the bread. I think maybe it'd be good to look at some of the other questions here.
Yeah. Stephanie had a second question, I think, actually, which was about affordability, and somebody else, Patrick Hannay, has asked as well, what percentage we're distributing to and how do we make a dent on supermarket? These are massive issues, that plague us and keep us awake at night. Because, yeah, I mean, it's still very much these are food choices that only some people can afford to make. And we are working hard to get A, a fair price to producers, and B, a fair price to customers. And in the current food system, producers don't tend to get a fair price for their goods. So that is a big priority for us. We're really, going hard for that. And we're trying to get it to be as affordable as possible for people by cutting out all of the intervening overheads to be as lean as possible and efficient as possible. And frankly, in terms of the sort of next step for affordability, a lot of that has to come down to support from grant-funded programs that might be able to subsidize us to provide food at less than market price. And Tamar Grow Local's got a great program working with Plymouth Community Homes, supplying regular shipments of fruit and veg into houses and households in the city that can't afford to buy this produce normally, supported with cooking skills and work like that. But it's absolutely the case that it's very challenging to be operating in the intensive food supply system that we're operating in, where prices in the supermarkets are artificially low, and therefore it's very hard to shift people in scale into alternative systems.
The other thing to mention in terms of food equality is that there was a really interesting shift that happened during the first lockdown, the COVID lockdown. Prior to that, we'd seen the Open Food Network being used, as I say, to run food hubs like the ones we're looking at here, where the prices do tend to be quite high because we're paying a fair price to the producer and the quantities are quite small. And then alongside that, on the Open Food Network were food banks that were distributing surplus produce, and that might be supermarket surplus, or it might be gleaned produce from producers who, for whatever reason, had produce that wasn't economically viable to harvest, and those were being distributed using the Open Food Network to people who were in food poverty. But the two didn't have much to do with each other. And the shift that happened during the pandemic is that a lot of the existing food hubs that were using the Open Food Network were very in touch with their local communities. They were very aware that suddenly food poverty was a much bigger issue than it had been pre-pandemic, and that there were ways to use the food hub system to meet all the needs of their local community, not just the needs of the people who could afford to pay a premium for local food. And there's all sorts of useful initiatives been springing up where people have been, food hub managers have been encouraging their shoppers to pay it forward, to buy when they're buying a veg box through their food hub, to buy a veg box for a neighbour they haven't met yet, or to pay a premium, a voluntary premium at checkout. And this is used to create an income, to create a bursary fund, where the food hub can then, at its discretion, either give away free food or reduced cost food to people who can't afford it. And there's loads of interesting stuff being done around food dignity, so that people don't have to ask for help with food prices if the food hub wants to set it up on a basis where people pay what they can afford, then that is feasible. But it's a much more integrated response to food poverty than food banks, in my opinion, which can perpetuate food poverty. But to actually have a single community enterprise that is addressing the needs of all of the people in their community, it's amazing how generous people are being within their community in a way that is maybe triggered by the pandemic. Maybe it was there already, but it is definitely an issue that we are very interested in terms of how to make food available to people regardless of income. What other questions have we got here? There was a question around the role of local authorities. I don't know if you want to pick that one up, Dom. I mean, my experience of local authorities is that they're very supportive of food hubs, and the food hubs that I've been part of setting up have been very supported by their local authorities in terms of checking that the premises is appropriate, checking they've got the right paperwork in place, the right registrations, and supporting them to build a network of producers. We are working with a couple of local authorities in Wales around public procurement, so looking at ways that hospital buyers, school buyers, people who are buying for public authorities can actually buy from small-scale local producers by aggregating up, so that even though an individual small-scale producer might not be able to meet a public procurement contract on their own, by working collectively with several other local producers, they can provide 100 kilos of carrots every week to a particular school or hospital or whatever. Is there any sort of reflections from you, Dom, on terms of local authorities with the network?
Yeah, and I think yes, as Sarah's commented in the chat, we're part of, through the Devon Food Partnership, using Healthy Start vouchers to enable people to have access to quality local food, properly sourced local food. And that's a great initiative, and that's an example of the local authority, Devon County Council in this case, really stepping forward to help make that happen, and working with a network of suppliers to get that kind of scale and availability that's also the challenge for small scale growers. I think local authorities can also help with premises actually for hubs, and quite often local authorities own perhaps industrial estate premises, and that could be provided at cheap rent or zero rent for hubs to operate from. Local authority kind of promotion and publicity channels can come in really help, and can be really useful as well for getting the message across. And I think on a whole policy front, then just what are the things that are really preventing food hubs taking off and taking a bigger share of the market? Really, it's about the availability of cheap industrialized food and people being unable to afford an alternative. And that it's not that much in local government's gift to tackle that playing field. It's really a central government issue. But I think getting awareness across the field, across the policy and governance field, of what the issues are here and what needs to change to make us to fix the broken food system, local authorities can get behind that effort and kind of start to recognise what's really going on here. We need to facilitate a flourishing independent sector to meet our food needs, or much more of our food needs, and local authorities can make that happen.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions around the types of products that are being sold. Kemi had a question about African heritage products being brought in, products that can't necessarily be grown in the UK. And then Ben had a question about, are there any particular products that you're struggling to source in your Southwest loop? Just picking up the one about the types of products that are sold. When we set up our food hub, we were very idealistic about it. We wanted to only sell produce that was grown within a 30-mile radius of Stroud. And then a lot of our shoppers were saying, yeah, but my kids have to have bananas. I can't survive without bananas. And if I'm going to go to Tesco to buy bananas, I might as well buy my other stuff at Tesco. And after much nail biting, we did decide that we would sell bananas and we'd sell all sorts of other things, and that we would be realistic about trying to make a local food system work and to buy in the appropriate products when we needed to buy them in. So again, it's a very much a local decision, and each one of the principles of the Open Food Network is subsidiarity, that the decisions should be made at the most local level appropriate. So if you decide you want to sell African heritage products and you're happy to buy them in, I know that Dom, you might want to talk about the 10%, to talk more about the 10% charge to try and encourage local production. But yeah, there are definitely hubs that are buying in produce from all over the world into their hubs. Yes,
and Tamar Grow Local are a good example. They have a once a year delivery from an organic olive farm in Spain that brings in some really great quality organic oil, and they then sell it on just in one big hit out to their customer base. It's an example of bringing in a specialist product. I was going to talk about one of our most successful producers was an organic pork producer in South Devon who came into the network, and we didn't have access to organic pork at that point. And although they're quite far from us geographically, they were able to join in the network and start making it worthwhile for them to be traveling into Exeter themselves. Actually, they're getting enough volume of supply to East Devon and down to Tamar to make it worth them traveling in. So yeah, that was another example. I was just reflecting as well back on the sort of affordability challenge. Actually, some of our vegetable producers are producing amazing quality organic veg at cheaper than comparable supermarket prices, and the quality is like 1,000 times better. So, you know, organic, local, small producers doesn't have to be more expensive than what the mainstream is offering. So I think that's worth bearing in mind.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions about the viability of hubs, and are the hubs breaking even? That's a really good question. The food hub that I'm part of in Stroud, we were grant funded initially, and we are now self-sufficient based on the markup that we make on producer prices. We're working with the Welsh Government. The Welsh Government has just recently funded 5 new food hubs across Wales, and they will be paying the running costs, the cost of the manager to run the food hub for the first 24 months of trading, because it is a case of scale. These things only work when they get to scale, and it either depends on grant funding or volunteers setting up the food hub, or some kind of philanthropic approach to starting these things up. But yes, once they get to scale, they are self-sufficient. If you look on the Open Food Network website, openfoodnetwork.org.uk, and in our resources section, you'll see case studies of several successful food hubs across the UK. One thing that Dom mentioned in his presentation that I need to cover fairly soon is about the different software platforms that are available for this kind of thing. We've talked a bit about the Open Food Network. I'll talk more in a moment about the principles behind it. But there are many platforms, and during the pandemic, several new platforms that sprung up to build local food systems. And Open Food Network is one of them. One of the hubs in the Southwest Loop is the Apricot Centre, which uses the Open Food Network for part of its trading and Boxmaster for another part of its trading, Boxmaster being a platform that's primarily for veg boxes. And one of the issues with using multiple platforms is interoperability. It's about a data standard, about the complexities of needing to hold stock on 2 or more different platforms. So we've recently had some funding from the lottery to run an interoperability project that's been coordinated by the Open Food Network, but we are working with Boxmaster and Big Barn and several other software platforms to look at this issue of interoperability and to try and find a way for producers and food hubs of all kinds to find the most appropriate software platform for them, and to draw elements of functionality from other platforms, and for people who want to use multiple platforms to be able to have a data standard that fits across them both. And we believe that is the way forward. The Open Food Network is a not-for-profit open source platform. It is not aiming for supremacy of any kind. We want to find a way to build effective grassroots local food systems that will eventually provide a viable alternative to the supermarket systems. And we know that there are some amazing bits of software out there, and we want to connect with them and give people as much choice as possible in terms of the platform they use. There's a load of questions I'm not getting to here, Dom, and I also want to talk briefly about the Open Food Network, and I'm wondering what order to do them in. Maybe I'll do a quick OFN presentation, seeing as I'd started on that, and then we'll come back to some of these questions in a minute. So many good questions. Let me do a very brief summary of what the Open Food Network is. I'm going to start with the global picture. So the Open Food Network is a global community of farmers, growers, community food enterprises, and software geeks who collectively share a passion and a belief that the food systems of the world are broken and that we need to rebuild those systems from the bottom up. We believe that if we're going to build a new food system, we need to build it with tools that are different than the systems, than the tools that we use to build the current systems. And for us, that means open source. It means that the software platform itself needs to be in common ownership. It needs to be a commonwealth, not a tool that is or a platform that is owned and controlled privately. In the UK, it looks a bit like this: about 3,000 producers and about 120 different hubs. The producers shown by the tractor symbols, the hubs as the shop symbols. Most of the hubs themselves will look a bit like this to their direct shoppers and buyers. This is the food hub that I helped to run in Gloucestershire. It's just a standard WordPress site where we talk a little bit about our visions and our values. But if you were to click on the shop tab, it would take you to the Open Food Network that lies behind there, with a notices page and a shop page and so on. And then a lot of different functionality available on the back end. If we were to log in, there's lots of functionality that's there to enable producers to set up their products, to enable the food hubs to set up what we call order cycles, an order cycle being a period during which the shopper or the buyer places an order for delivery or collection at a particular time, to see the orders that they come in, to take phone orders for people who don't have internet access, produce the various reports. So lots of back-end functionality. And as I say, it's owned and controlled collectively by the people who use it. So in the UK, there is a community interest company that has a board of directors, and everybody who uses the software can stand for election and control the way it's managed in the UK. And then there is a global community of people from different countries who decide the future direction of the software. So, Dom, any questions in the chat that you wanted to?
There's a very quick technical one I just thought I'd just better touch on, which was about I think from can't remember the name of the person actually, but it was about how the actual sort of money flows and goods flow, and do the goods change hands, and are they traded? No, if you imagine a customer living in Exeter might place an order through the Good Food Exeter marketplace for some fish. And that fish would then be picked up by the Tamar Grow local van as it drove through Plymouth and delivered to Exeter. And Good Food Exeter will pay Soul of Discretion, the Plymouth fishmonger, direct for that fish. And Good Food Exeter also pay Tamar Grow local direct 10% for the distribution fee. So invoice passes from Tamar Grow local to Good Food Exeter, and from Soul of Discretion to Good Food Exeter, but the goods are paid for and delivered direct between the hub and the producer. So that's a little technical point. Yes, that was Matt Dale's question. Yeah.
There was a point. There's been a bit of a chat going on about farm drop, and Ben making the point that a lot of the other platforms that are out there are venture capital funded, and Farm Drop was primed. It had quite a lot of investment money went into it, and it was running at a loss. And as you may know, Farm Drop has now withdrawn their services, and that is my point about the ownership and the control of our food systems. That if we are relying on venture capital funded, privately owned platforms, then there is an inherent risk there that we might end up in the same situation we are now, where the supermarkets have a stranglehold on the food distribution system, and that if we start with tools that are in common ownership, that is not going to happen.
Yeah, and just a bit more detail on the sort of viability question. Again, like you with Stroudco, Tamar Grow Local is well established, been around for many years, and is financially profitable. in my backyard, likewise, and the Apricot Centre. Good Food Exeter is a very young organisation. It's only been around for less than 2 years, and it's got a very small customer base. So it is struggling and not making a profit at the moment, but it's had some grant funding to help get it off the ground. And we're hopeful that it will get up to the kind of scale that it needs to be viable fairly soon. A question from Mark Measures was about organic standards, and I thought that was interesting to explore, and just to explain that we're not exclusively organic. We do favour organic, but certainly across our network, well, Tamar Grow Local and Good Food Exeter for sure are not exclusively organic, but anybody supplying us, we know we've had good relationships with, we've visited them, we've understood what their systems are, and we're happy that they are following good sustainable principles. It's not always easy, especially for small scale producers, to justify organic registration. So yeah, we've got a diverse sort of sourcing policy, but ethical through and through.
And one of the reasons I think we need organic standards is because there is a huge disconnect between the people who are growing the food and the people who are eating it. And if we can make the food supply chain shorter and build connections between the farmers, the growers, and the eaters, then we are less dependent on an external certification process. And it's the same with our food hub. Many of the producers are very small scale. Some of them are better than organic. I know that we've got Helen Brent Smith on this call, who is part of Days Cottage Apple Juice. They have completely unsprayed orchards, so they're much, much better quality produce than organic, because organic does allow some spraying of produce. But they don't certify as organic. But because we know them and we sell their produce through our food hub, we are confident that it is much better than organic standards without the certification. There's a question from Sasha about food assembly. Yes, food assembly does still exist. Food assembly pulled out of the UK market about 2 years ago because they weren't making a big enough return on investment from the UK market. And when they withdrew the software from the UK, then the 60 different food hubs that were using their platform had 3 months notice to stop using the software, and then many of them closed down because they couldn't face the transition of moving from one software platform to another. So yes, Food Assembly is a French company, but not trading in the UK.
There was a question from Edward McDonald about what are the drawbacks to the hub buying the produce as opposed to producers selling directly. And maybe that's one for you, Nick, to comment on.
Sorry, Dom, I was reading somebody else's comment. Can you repeat that for me?
What are the drawbacks to the hub buying the produce as opposed to producers selling directly? And this is one of kind of about the whole benefits for the producer of just concentrating on growing rather than all the marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is very much a personal choice. Many of the producers on the Open Food Network do sell direct. And they sell direct from the farm. They have a particular day of the week that they allow. They have as a pickup day. People place orders. They then the produce is harvested to order, so there's no waste. They know exactly what to harvest every week, and then they have a pickup day where people will come and collect what is coming from the farm. Some of those farms are also producer hubs, so they sell their own produce, but they will sell produce from neighboring farms as well. So they'll have agreements with other neighboring farmers that they will sell their produce, and they will make a markup on other people's produce that they sell through their hub. And the majority of the producers, certainly in the UK, will choose not to sell direct because they don't want the hassle. They want to focus on growing good quality food, and so they will register on the Open Food Network or on whatever platform they want to use, and then they will approach the shops, which might be a producer hub nearby. It might be a food hub like the one that I run that doesn't actually produce anything at all. We simply use a church hall on a Friday morning as a distribution point. But it is down to personal preference of the producer, and it does. I think the reason most producers sell only through hubs is because they don't want the hassle of doing the marketing. They don't want the hassle of sorting the orders. They don't want the hassle of taking individual payments from individual shoppers. And the whole sort of administration of distribution is painful for a lot of producers, and they will choose not to do it. But that is a personal choice, and as I say, some people do choose to do both, sell direct from the farm and sell through one or more hubs.
The public procurement questions come up a couple of times, and I think that is really interesting, because we've done quite a lot of work as within Food Exeter, which is a charity operating in Exeter that I support, and is scoping out the barriers for effective public procurement. Has shown that it's very difficult to break into some of these contracts that schools or hospitals are operating, and you really need far-sighted managers within those organisations who are prepared to kind of go the extra mile and bend over backwards to source local food. And then you've still got to find confidence in the volume of supply, the consistency that they want. Most small producers don't have a way of doing that really, or of aggregating their produce across several different farms to get it into that system. I mean, there are solutions being developed. There's the Southwest Food Hub with its dynamic procurement model is trying to get a platform developed that will allow public sector to purchase from much smaller scale producers. That works in development, and I think that if we can try and influence that work so that it promotes agroecological growing and is prepared to pay a fair price to agroecological growers, then that could be transformational. But my fear is that they'll be very cost conscious, and quality will tend to drift towards the bottom. And that's where, as someone's commented, if local authorities would commit, if public sector organisations would commit to a percentage of their food purchasing being organic or agroecological, then that would be massively transformational for the system.
There's a question about Healthy Start vouchers, and yes, several of the food hubs that I'm involved with do take Healthy Start vouchers. So there's an option to set up different payment methods at checkout. Some hubs will take credit cards, some will take bank transfers, some will offer discounts at checkout, and some will offer the option to actually increase the basket value at checkout to pay into a bursary fund. And one of the options is to set up to enable people to pay with Healthy Start vouchers. So the hub registers as a Healthy Start retailer, and the shoppers then can come along and at checkout spend their Healthy Start vouchers.
A question about food hubs and farmers markets from David Davis. That's an interesting one. There is a farmers market in Exeter that operates every Thursday, and our food hub operates separately from that. Many of the suppliers to the farmers market are also suppliers to the food hub, so they can work quite closely together. We deliberately didn't run our delivery day on the same day as the farmers market, so that we weren't because we recognized there'll be some overlap between customers. But one good thing about a food hub is that customers can possibly say, oh, I can pick up my produce direct from the grower at the farmers market, and then I can place an order for more of the produce for a delivery a different day of the week, so I can still get a fresh supply more than once a week if I need it.
The other thing to mention about farmers markets and an online option within the farmers market is what I've seen with some markets is that they will be limited for space, and they can only have a certain number of producers selling at that market. And some of the producers in the area may be too small to justify having a stall at a farmers market. Whereas if there's an online component to the farmers market, then a wider range of producers can sell at that market, and they will just deliver the pre-sold produce to a particular stall that would then be available for people to pick up pre-ordered produce from the market. So it enables more producers to get involved in the market. It also has the benefit that a lot of the producers who are coming to the farmers market are going back to their farms with empty vans or half empty vans, and they can take pre-ordered boxes back to their farms, and they can then become a pickup point for those online orders. So it extends the geographical reach of the market, reduces the carbon footprint because people don't have to drive into the market. They can drive to a more local pickup point on one of the local farms, and it just extends the geographical reach of the market.
There's a question about the Stroudco's plans actually for the Southwest Food Loop.
Yeah,
Similar.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Stroudco has been running for something like 14 years now. We helped to bring the Open Food Network to the UK 7 years ago. We had our own bit of open source software that was a bit Heath Robinson, to be honest, and it needed rewriting. And when we were looking for new software, we found the Open Food Network. But Stroudco is a bit isolated. It's the only food hub in our area, and we are very inspired by what's happening in the Southwest, and would like, we've played with the idea of having what we call daughter hubs, where we would have, you know, in surrounding towns and villages, little hubs that would be drawing from the same producer base as us, but would be sort of distribution points. But yeah, I'd be interested in your advice, Tom. If I was starting, if I wanted to build towards what you've got, what would be the first steps in terms of what Stroudco would need to do to build a network of hubs?
How well? What are the? I'll be looking at what my centres of population were within a 3/4 mile drive. So where have you got other centres of population? And then looking at whether there's producers around those, whether there's potential for a hub as a standalone to serve those centres of population, and then whether you can start intertrading with that hub to access the suppliers that might be in the catchment zone of that centre, of that town, and see if there's benefits in terms of produce range, seasonality, etc., specialist producers that you want to access and you want to give your customers access to. And you could almost see supporting a hub to develop in one of those centres as being part of your own development of your offer to your customers.
Okay, I mean, my answer to that is I know there are people on this call now who are from the Dean Forest Food Hub, and I wonder if it might be interesting. I know we've had conversations in the past about linking the two hubs. I wonder if anybody who's on this call from the Dean Forest Food Hub would be interested in doing a sort of live chat now about how that would work, how we might be able to link our two food hubs. I mean, it's probably a 45-minute link was Simon's maximum. I think just about a 45-minute drive from Forest of Dean to Stroud. Certainly from my perspective as part of the Stroudco Food Hub, I'd be very interested in linking up and bringing our two producer bases. I can see that Jackie's putting her camera on. What do the Dean Forest people think, if they are able and willing to chip into this conversation?
That looks like Jackie's online with us.
There's Jackie.
No, she's
muted.
That's it.
I've unmuted. There we go. I've got a really slow link today, I'm afraid. It is an idea. We've already split into two hubs. We have 2 days that we do now, not just one. So what we're trying to do is to grow like yeast, not like a balloon. We're kind of popping off smaller hubs in the area. It would be great to be able to link up, but we're just about at capacity at the moment of what is actually available from our local producers. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much extra they would want to take on. Yeah.
And that is definitely an issue with many food hubs, is finding, particularly startup food hubs, is finding local producers, because that's the nature of local food systems, that the food production is becoming less and more diverse, less and less diverse, more and more centralized, and it is hard to find small scale local producers who can supply into food hubs.
And that's the beauty of the loop, because we in Exeter, when we started developing the link to Tamar, we were suddenly able to add a much bigger range of producers, product and choice for our customers. And suddenly our customers had it, oh wow, you can buy fish and you can buy organic pork through the Good Food Exeter. Well, we couldn't do that before, and suddenly people started shopping with us who weren't before. So if you've got actually reached a threshold, Jackie, in terms of the volume of product that's available to you in your area, possibly there's a huge benefit to you in terms of trading over to Stroud, because you could be importing food from the Stroud growing area that to meet the needs of your local people. And perhaps there are some specialist products, I don't know what...
Wild boar.
Wild boar, I do, exactly. That the people in Stroud would love to buy, so who knows? And that could fuel the growth of the producers in your area, that for them to scale up. And this actually happened with in my backyard, the Bullstone Farm organic chicken producers have discovered that the demand is just becoming so much greater than they could meet, that they needed to scale up. So I think this is about growing the sector.
Mm. We have had new producers deliberately coming to the area because they knew there was an easy way to market. There's a new organic garden set up. We were really pleased to see them, and they're doing very well. So yeah, you can actually expand the production side as well, if you're lucky. And if someone happens to find some land, that's the real bugbear.
Yeah, absolutely right. And Tamar Grow Local have got a great project around providing startup units for growers, for horticulture in their patch. But yeah, that's a perennial challenge, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Jackie. And yes, let's keep talking.
Yeah.
There's a question from Mark about, can retailers be part of the network? And yes, there are certainly many retailers across the UK who are using the Open Food Network and other platforms to have an online shopfront in addition to their physical retail presence. And from a Southwest Loop perspective, I don't see any reason, Dom, why that retailers shouldn't be included in that loop as part of the distribution.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it could be that the challenge will be for the hub, if the product is coming from the producer, it's being delivered in, and then it's being picked up by somebody else to retail, the hub would need to charge something for the work it was doing there. Yeah. And that additional fee might make it uncompetitive for the retailer, because they then have to be charging their own overheads on top of that again. But it's worth exploring, and anything is helpful. Just an interesting comment from Harvest Workers Co-op in Oakhampton. Hi, Sarah. Struggling to get products delivered because they're driving to Exeter. I mean, just imagine we could return from Exeter via Oakhampton to the west side of Dartmoor. We could change our loop and make it a complete proper loop, and be picking up and be dropping off in Oakhampton. So again, if you're short of suitable suppliers, you could be accessing anything from that whole circuit, from Tamar Valley round to South Devon, through Exeter and East Devon, back up to you. And who knows, there might be producers who want to sell down into the Tamar Valley. So yeah, that sounds like a conversation worth having. We've got business development happening live on stream at the ORFC. It's great.
As somebody said, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Sarah,
Thanks,
did you want to come in, Sarah? Maybe on mute.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. Yeah, well, our main obstacle is we work with a lot of really small scale producers, and of course, they don't seem to have anybody else to deliver to around where we are. So if they come here, it's only for us. So that's an obstacle for them. And we end up, even producers that are closer to us, they will drive to Exeter to deliver there, but not come to Oakhampton, and then we will have to drive to Exeter as well, which is fine. And we are making it work. We got a very good connection with Sealing for Organics, where we used to be based. So we make it work, but it's also the case that different small suppliers will bring their stuff there on different days. So we can't even like go once a week and collect, because some people deliver there on Monday, some on Wednesday, some on Friday. So we have to end up going 3 times a week to bring things to Oakhampton, and we go empty and come back with that. And there is definitely potential to create other connections there that would be like win-win. It's just a start in the conversation, I suppose, to make it happen.
Yeah. What platform are you using for your scheme?
We got no platform. We are only, I don't know how we call it, real life.
Okay.
We haven't got an online platform. We go a front shop in Oakhampton town. And we got the farm. We also got a farm just outside Oakhampton.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a pure high street retail outlet.
We are a non-profit workers cooperative that we run. A shop is only part of what we do. We also run a community and program, and we are involved in a lot of different little projects around food access as well. And we also have the market garden farm outside Oakhampton.
Great, definitely worth talking. Look forward to it. We'll hook up after this. Yeah, thanks.
Great. There's a question from Francesca. We might have answered that already. What conditions would need to be in place to enable viable and successful expansion? And I'm not sure, Francesca, if your question is about the loop, the Southwest Good Food Network loop, or whether you're talking about conditions for the food hub. So I'll talk briefly about food hub viability. It is definitely quite a science of working out how many producers you have locally already, because you do need a certain number of producers who are interested and willing to sell produce through a food hub. They need to be willing to sell quite small volumes initially, because your shopper base, your buyer base will be quite small initially. So those producers need to be willing to support the food hub as the volumes grow. You also need the right number of the right kind of shoppers and buyers who are willing to pay those prices for that food. You need to make sure that you have linked up with any existing stakeholders. So rather than setting up a food hub in competition with a farmer's market or in competition with a CSA project, that you link in with those projects and you make them partners, collaborators in the building of the food hub, because they are complementary. They can be set up in a way that is competitive, but it's much better if they're set up collaboratively. So building in the other stakeholders right from the beginning of a food hub definitely is key. Making sure the right producers are in place and the right shoppers are in place is key. And then lots of tips and tricks around building a loyal customer base around a food hub. On the Open Food Network resources page, you'll find something called Thriving Food Hubs, which is all sorts of ideas and suggestions, not just for setting up accounting systems and setting up food safety systems, but particularly around the marketing and the social media and building a good social media profile. And we've just recently recruited 3 Kickstarter employees who are working with Open Food Network food hubs to help them get their social media as effective as possible. But Dom, I wondered if you wanted to talk more specifically about the Southwest Network, what conditions are need to be in place to enable viable and successful expansion.
Yes, I think that I touched on a few of those at the start, but maybe it's worth repeating. Aligning your order and delivery cycles is really crucial. So your food hubs need to be flexible about how they set themselves up or operate. And that was certain. We've got examples of hubs operating close to Exeter with Shillingford Farm. Shillingford Organics, which is a very large scale veg box scheme, was keen to participate in the hub, but we just couldn't get the order cycles lined up effectively. And again, when we were doing some of our early pilot work, we were trying to reach up into Somerset, a bit too far away, but also again, order cycles weren't lining up. So that's really important, and it's worth, if you are starting something up from scratch, kind of looking hard at how you can make that work, because you want all your customer orders to come in and at the same time, or be the order cycle closes on the same day. You can look at everything that's been ordered, and you can let your producers know, and then all the produce can then flow around the system cleanly. So that's one thing. I guess another is about, I mean, the marketing, Nick, is crucial for each individual food hub. Needs to be thriving and needs to be successful to be able to support its part of the network. And the social media side of things, and the support that we've had from OFN has been really excellent, really useful. So I'd talk to that. Someone's asked about the kind of premises that we had in Good Food Exeter and how we managed to get that. That was through a very supportive local social enterprise, it's charity actually, that runs a high street community centre with a cafe and a bakery. And the bakery supplies our hub, and they also had space that we could use for our weekly packing and distribution cycle on a Friday. So that was quite critical to us, having that very close partner able to offer us that at a cheap rent, an affordable rent. I wonder what other conditions are needed. It's good if you all get on and can have a good laugh, and because it can be difficult, it can be challenging. There's some challenging conversations to be had to make sure that people are kind of keeping the systems up and running. You know, you need your marketplaces, each individual hub's marketplace needs to be working well, and people need to be sort of following through on commitments. So yeah, it's good to have good personal relations to back that work up. But we get through on that front.
The question from David about the relationship between food hubs and farmers markets, and I think I might have already answered that already, but the experience that we have across the UK as a whole, looking at different hubs and markets, is that they can be very complementary. In some cases they haven't been they've been set up in a very competitive way, but they can be incredibly complementary, and when they are complementary, they both benefit from that. The local food market is small enough that we don't need is large enough that we don't need to compete with each other, and we can build the market so much more effectively if we collaborate. And that collaboration looks like the market continuing to thrive, and then using the online food hub as a partner to bring in new producers, to bring in new distribution opportunities for the farmers market, and for the farmers market producers, when they're coming to town anyway to sell their produce, pre-selling some of that produce through the food hub as well. So it increases the turnover for the farmers market producers. So yes, it can be very complementary, can go the other way and become competitive.
There's a question from Alan Chubb about supplying wine to a hub. Yes, the hub does need to have its own alcohol license, and Tamar Grow Local may already have got their license. They were in the process of applying for it end of last year. So hopefully they've got through on that front. Maybe in time for Christmas, who knows?
Yeah. And hello, Alan, nice to see you. Yes, Stroudco has a license as well. So that is all doable. We have another 15 minutes. It looks like there is another question coming in, but if the questions are starting to dry up, then I'm very happy for people to unmute. And if people want to unmute and have a conversation, have a chat with Dominic and myself, we'd be very happy to have this as a more normal face-to-face kind of chat, rather than reading questions from the chat. So any comments or thoughts or opinions from people? One thing that was striking me when you were just talking just now, Dominic, was that I would love to have some kind of forum where people all across the UK could experiment with setting up these kinds of networks and sharing ideas. So this could be, the beginning of that is just a quick chat with people who are on this call who are thinking they might want to start building these kind of networks, to please unmute and say so, and we could start to knock that around as the beginning of network of networks across the UK. While you're getting brave enough to unmute and maybe even turn your camera on.
Alison's just commented that Tony Little made a point about public procurement, saying that dynamic procurement systems might, in theory, work, but in practice, small producers might see it as relatively complicated. And I think that is probably quite true.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But we are looking at how we can work together in the Exeter area with the larger scale organic producers to supply the market. So, but the public sector market, I'm sure it's a lot of exciting stuff's going to happen on that front in this year.
There is the beginning. Well, we're very close now to beginning a project, and again with the Welsh government, looking at public procurement and building some models around the open food network system to experiment with exactly those issues. Tony, yes. How do you cope with the volume issue from producer to buyer?
Yeah.
I can see Kemi has raised her hand, but just briefly, Max has put in a question about, do we know any networks in Kent? There is an organisation called Kent Food Hubs, which has Ashford, Folkestone, one or two other towns in Kent, which are already networked. So please do have a look at openfoodnetwork.org.uk, go to shops and then search either Kent Food Hubs or Ashford or Folkestone, and you'll find your way into a network there in Kent. Kemi, I know you put a couple of questions in, and it'd be really nice to hear from you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the fantastic work that you're doing around, local supplies and shortening the food chain to get to consumers. I have worked with schools for the past 20 years, helping those who care to transform their food culture. And one of the things that we particularly do with schools is encouraging schools to focus on supporting their community and actually getting their supplies from local organizations rather than looking for the big organizations who claim to offer them cheap price and all of that. And the one thing that has been very clear and successful in that process is the fact that the schools have taken control. I work with schools who actually choose to run their own catering service in-house. The most successful things we've had is the stability of staff and the quality of food that the children have been able to enjoy. And people would like to say that, the big multinationals supply good food and all that. I'm not disputing that. It's just not my cup of tea. My thing is that the local food, the free range organic food is far better for health than anything else that can be offered. And I can put up my hand and claim that all of my schools, they do make, they break even if they don't make surplus, because their focus is not to make profit, but it's to make the children are the shareholders of their school food. And therefore they make the decisions about what produce is used in their food. And so I think the open network and the work that Good Food Exeter is doing is fantastic. And I will encourage you to also reach out to your local schools and speak with them and let them see that it's not always, about, how do they say it? Sell it cheap, pile it high, or whatever. It's about health. It's about getting our young people to appreciate good food. They don't have to eat a lot of it. Just eat what your body needs, and that's all that matters. Yeah. And in terms of African and Caribbean heritage food, yes, I raised that question because I was reading some research in this past week demonstrating that actually there are issues around food, you know, in terms of genetics. As I said to you, Nick, in my note, lactose intolerance amongst African adults is a big deal. And so drinking milk and all of that, because you're here in the West, it's not good for our health. And therefore we need to revert back to those diets that sustain us rather than just having to eat what you can lay your hands on. Yeah. And so the ACH has been advocating and working hard over the past year to see how we can make African and Caribbean food more accessible within the UK to people who need it and need to have it. So that was the basis of my question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to talk to you more, Kemi, about linking up with the work that you're doing and having more of African Caribbean food represented on the Open Food Network. So let's talk again at the end of this. Thank you. Yeah. I know that India has a hand up, so bear with us and we'll come to you in a moment. There's a question in the chat. According to our experience, what's the most valuable and profitable sales channel for producers and farmers? Is it farmers markets? Is it box schemes? Is it hubs? I think my answer to that is that it depends a lot on the local environment and the local networks and the local population levels and so on. But one general comment I'd make is that one piece of learning that came out of the pandemic again was that supply chains need to be varied. And if a producer is relying on a single source to market, single route to market, it is possible that that route to market might be disrupted. So we had situations where we had farmers and growers who were selling entirely to restaurants and cafes, and suddenly those restaurants and cafes were closed and there was produce in polytunnels in fields that needed to be harvested and there was no outlet for it. So one thing we do try to encourage is a mixed route to market that enables producers to sell direct, to sell through hubs, to sell through markets, to sell through local shops, and that the more varied it is, the more resilient it is in times of crisis. I don't know if Don wants to come in on that, or shall we take India's question?
No, I think you covered that question absolutely. Spot on.
Great, thank you. India, can we hear from you?
Hi, thank you for your talk so far. 2 points or 2 questions. How does the Food Network connect with wholesaling? As in, I'm from Jersey and we're interested to set up potentially new food networks. I partly run a cooperative, which is a consumer cooperative, but looking for a kind of effective satellite organisations, because ours is very time consuming. People come to us, and so we penetrated as much as a market. But what we've noticed is we need to import a consistency of the market. So does your back end allow for wholesale to fulfill orders, or is it just about local producers? And then the second thing is, there's some really interesting conversations to be had in Jersey around, in terms of the Welsh procurement strategy, around the size of farmer that's connected with hospitals and police, prison services, etc., because I know that local farmers have solely supported those markets here in Jersey, and so I think it might have been an interesting conversation, because Jersey's had to be resilient and support those markets and pulled out of those markets, because you kind of tend to opt for larger organisations, but it doesn't quite work because it's large organisations with a productionist kind of viewpoint. So I think opening that conversation of how scale can actually really suit the ultra small into those larger markets, from a bit of discussions I've had here. There are 2 points.
Thank you. 2 really good points. Dom, do you want to go first or shall I go first?
No, you go first. You'll probably understand the wholesaler side of things better than I do.
Yeah, I could do the wholesaler one. So yes, many wholesalers sell through the Open Food Network. There are some food hubs. Tamar Valley Food Hubs is one of them that has a retail shopfront and a wholesale shopfront. So they sell to consumers on their retail shop front, and then they sell to organizations on their wholesale shop front. And they source produce from wholesalers as well. So an example is Essential Trading, which is a whole food wholesaler. They are registered as a producer on the Open Food Network. So any shop front, any hub on the Open Food Network can source from Essential Trading. They can order produce through them. And there's two ways that works. In some cases, the food hub will buy in produce from the wholesaler, and it will store that produce and then sell it on to their shoppers. So they might buy, sacks of 25 kilo sacks of dry goods, or they might buy trays of tins of baked beans or whatever, and they'll store them and then sell them over time to their shoppers in retail quantities. And there is the option for a hub to set up a wholesale order cycle where the shoppers can place orders with those wholesalers in bulk. So the shoppers are buying 25 kilo sacks for their own consumption and the trays of baked beans for their own consumption. And when that order cycle gets to the minimum order volume for that wholesaler, which in the case of Essential Trading is somewhere between 250 and 300 pounds, depending on where in the country you are. When the order cycle gets to that minimum order quantity, then all of that produce is ordered from the wholesaler, delivered to the hub, and the hub then distributes it to the buyers in wholesale quantities. So both of those things are happening within the Open Food Network. Your question about procurement is complicated, and yes, that is exactly what we are grappling with this new project funded by the Welsh Government, where we're working with health authorities in, I think it's Ceredigion and Carmarthenshire, to answer Matt's earlier question, to experiment with how can small-scale producers meet large-scale contracts like that by working together and by planning their cropping in such a way that they collectively can meet those quantities. I don't know if that answers your question, India, or whether we need a bit of input from Dom on that.
Well, we've got 2 minutes precisely left, so okay. I think
It
might be good just to wrap things up now anyway, actually, and just go. Just because we didn't actually tackle your suggestion that a forum would be a good idea. Is there a way we can capture? People could maybe email us to establish interest. How could we make this happen?
That's a good idea. Why don't Dom and I both put our email addresses in the chat, and anybody who'd like to be part of that forum can do so. India, apologies if we cut you short there, and please do contact me, and we can talk more.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat, and please do.
I have done too. Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant. Reminder that the session has been recorded, and so it will all be available along with the chat on YouTube as soon as the technicians have been able to sort it all out. So within the next week or two, so people can go back into it if they want to sort of double check things or check out references.
Thank you, Alison. That's fantastic. Good. Great to have you all here. Thank you so much, Dom, for your input and your contributions. And it's been a pleasure to chat to you all. Our email addresses are in there. If you'd like more detail, please do get in touch. And let's have networks of networks. That ORFC next year will be comparing notes of all the multiple networks across the UK. Best wishes, everybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.